Hello, everybody. The Honourable Mojalefa Mogono, distinguished panelists, Yusuf Timol, the Minister Economic at the South African Embassy in Beijing, and Maxine Barnett, founder and CEO of Acorus Capital, and guests, chamber members and friends. I do hope you're all having a great day wherever you are. I'd like to extend a very warm welcome and thank you to all of you for joining us today for this exceptional online event. Those of you I haven't met before, my name is Charlton. I'm the chair of the Commonwealth Chamber of Commerce in Hong Kong. The Chamber's been active for just over a year, and during this time, we've delivered thought-provoking webinars on Commonwealth discourse and debates involving legal, economic, trade-related, and financial topics that will shape our future. And this wonderful event is no exception. Now more than ever, there's a crucial need to be present and involved in these areas to ensure that the interests of Commonwealth nations in Hong Kong are well represented, and that opportunities for the growth of trade and relations between the Commonwealth and Hong Kong are fully taken advantage of. This webinar is a great example of showcasing the immense potential of collaboration and development of trade relations between Hong Kong and South Africa. Overall, South Africa is an upper middle economy that is Africa's second largest, owing to its abundance in natural resources. It is, after all, the third largest producer of coal and produces 80% of the world's platinum, to give you just two examples. Due to its state-of-the-art infrastructure, it's Africa's most industrially advanced nation and most open economy. Its stock exchange is amongst the world's best, and in April last year, it was awarded the title of top global location for business process services. These are to list but a few of the nation's impressive achievements. The benefits of developing synergy with Hong Kong, which is a highly developed and pivotal Asian trading hub, are unparalleled, particularly given the established history of economic cooperation and the commonalities of the legal systems. I'm beyond excited to hear the insights and proposals for further development of trade relations from our panelists today. And as such, I'd like to take no further time away from what they're going to be sharing with us. I'd like to thank them very much for their attendance again, and I'll now pass the floor to our Secretary General, Andrew Wells, who'll be introducing our speakers and moderating the event. Andrew, over to you.
Many thanks indeed to our chairman, Julia Charlton, for her introduction to the Commonwealth Chamber of Commerce in Hong Kong and to today's important event, South Africa, Hong Kong, and the Commonwealth, a unique opportunity. My name is Andrew Wells, and I'm Secretary General of the Commonwealth Chamber of Commerce here in Hong Kong. I'm delighted as moderator to have the honor to introduce our three extremely distinguished speakers. Our keynote speaker, as Julia has mentioned, is Mr. Mojalefa Mogono, Consul General of South Africa in Hong Kong and Macau. Mr. Mogono is also a director of the South African Department of International Relations and Cooperation. Before taking up his present position this year, Mojalefa had extensive business experience in South Africa, mainly in the primary resources sector. In addition, he's a traditional leader in the Rustenburg area of South Africa, home to the Royal Bafokeng Nation, an important region close to the border with Namibia. The Consul General's unique background has led not only to him developing an understanding of South Africa's economic challenges. He's the recipient of numerous awards in business studies and related disciplines from the University of Pretoria, but also to an in-depth knowledge of community development, which underpins his own personal commitment to Commonwealth values. In his present senior public sector role, Mr. Mogono has already shown dedication to using his skill sets to strengthen ties between South Africa, Hong Kong, and Greater China. Recently, he was an officiating guest at the Belton Road National Art and Culture Exposition. Our second distinguished guest today is Mr. Yusuf Timol, the Minister Economic, to use the official designation of South Africa, in Beijing, where his remit includes encouraging investment into South Africa and improving the bilateral trade flow between the two key countries, much of which, of course, is routed through Hong Kong. Mr. Timol's previous experience also spans both the public and private sectors. In the latter, he's worked previously at New Africa Technology, as well as the global consulting firm Kaiser Associates, where he developed experience and connections with both India and the Middle East. Having moved across to the public sector, Initially in the South African Department of Trade and Industry, Yusuf joined the Foreign Service and has held senior posts in Iran, the United Kingdom, as well as South Africa itself. Our third speaker is Maxine Barnett, the founder and CEO of Acorus Capital. In this role, she oversees strategic corporate development and investor relations between her group's expanding network here in Hong Kong and in South Africa. Maxine has previously held senior positions at BNP Paribas, RBS Group, Credit Suisse, and Nomura. Importantly for this forum, Maxine's knowledge of risk and portfolio management, FinTech, strategic corporate development, and so on, is matched by an equally wide knowledge of Commonwealth markets. Excluding her native South Africa, these include Ghana, Mauritius, the United Kingdom, Singapore, the Cayman Islands, and Nigeria. So a big welcome then to all our speakers. Before we begin, please allow me to add a very quick word on procedural housekeeping. After the Consul General's keynote address, our other two panelists will have 10 or so minutes each to make their presentations, and will then move to questions and answers. Participants are strongly encouraged to type in their questions using the questions and answers icon at any time and indicating to which speakers they are addressed. Without any further preliminaries, I am pleased to invite Mr. Mojalefa Mogono, Consul General, to take the virtual floor. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Walls. Commonwealth Chamber of Commerce, Ms. Julia Charlton, our speakers, Mr. Yusuf Timol and Ms. Maxine Barnett, the Secretary General of the Common Chamber of Commerce, Mr. Andrew Wells, members of the Common Chamber of Commerce, ladies and gentlemen. We meet at a time when South Africa, like many others, is facing a huge challenges because of COVID-19 pandemic. Yet it is also a time of a great opportunity and promise. For 2 years, our world has been battered by a pandemic far worse than any experience in more than a century. Our economy, like so many around the world, has been severely damaged. Due to the decline in COVID infections, hospital admissions and deaths, and thanks to the levels of vaccination and immunity, we have entered a new phase in the management of the pandemic. We have been able to remove almost all restrictions on social and economic activities. We are learning to live, to work, and to build back and reconstruct with the virus in our midst. We know that our challenges are many, that they are complex and that they are protracted, but we are neither defined by these challenges, nor are we daunted by them. Rather, we are dictated to surely, steadily, and decisively overcoming them. For South Africa's economy to realize its potential as a supplier of products to markets across the world, it needs roads, railways, and ports that work. While we undertake a range of measures to improve operational performance, we are also implementing structural reforms to increase investments, introduce new technologies and skills, and improve efficiency in our rail and port infrastructure. In terms of communication, we will be completing the immigration of our TV signal from analog to digital, unlocking much of the country's digital potential. Our state-owned enterprises have been huge drain in fiscals over the years. Our reform process is aimed at bringing this to an end. Like many other countries, we are transforming our entire approach to state-owned companies so that they are better able to fulfill their vital social and economic functions. These reforms are not insignificant, nor they are superficial. These reforms are contributing to an economy that, despite the setbacks of the last 2 years, is developing and transforming. We see the signs of this everywhere. We see this in Postmasburg. It's a small town in the Northern Cape where the country's largest concentrated solar-powered plant is being built as part of our renewable energy independent power producers program. We see this in the upgrades to the passenger terminal at Durban Harbour in KwaZulu-Natal as part of the public-private partnership with Transnet. It can be seen at Toyota plant in KwaZulu-Natal, where the first hybrid vehicle produced in South Africa is being manufactured. It can be seen in Cape Town, where the non-SA vaccine manufacturing campus is being built. It can be seen in Gqeberha in the Eastern Cape, where the largest pharmaceutical manufacturing site in Africa, owned by Pharmacare, is producing products for domestic consumption and export. These are all places where investment commitments are being realized, where plants are being built, where jobs are being created, and where production is underway. We are supporting this investment with a renewed focus on expanding countries' economic and social infrastructure. All this work is part of the economic reconstruction and recovery plan that we put in place in October 2020 to drive growth and job creation in the aftermath of the pandemic. These measures that form part of the plan underpin the social compact that we are building among social partners, and specifically between government, labor, business, and community constituency. We seek a new consensus that draws together the resources, capabilities, and efforts of all sections of society to achieve our common goal of rapid and sustained recovery. We see this social compact in action through initiatives like the Youth Employment Service, which is collaboration between government and business to provide work experience opportunities to the unemployed youth. We see at work in the presidential employment stimulus, which has provided job and livelihood opportunities to over 800,000 people in the 17 months since it was established. We see the social compact at work in our infrastructure program in the several industries that have developed master plans to expand investment production and in other demand-led skill development programs. This is supported by a macroeconomic framework that is clear, stable, and prudent. We are working steadily to reduce our deficit and debt burden. We are shifting public spending away from consumption and servicing debt towards supporting capital investments, productive activity, and social development. Distinguished guests, it is nearly 4 years since since the country embarked on an ambitious drive to raise 1.2 trillion in new investment over 5 years. Despite the impact of the pandemic, by the time of the third South African Investment Conference in 2020, the country raised a total of 774 billion in investment commitments. We are 2/3 of the way to reaching our target. Of the 774 billion committed, around 316 billion has so far been invested. Of the 152 investment pledges, 45 projects have been completed. A further 57 are under construction. The investments that have been realized since our first conference have created job opportunities, increased localization, and expanded local value chains. They have brought skills, technology, and know-how into our economy. We invite you to be part of a young, dynamic, resilient nation positioning itself at forefront of the progress and change. We are forging ahead to transform our economy, to unlock our country's potential, to create meaningful livelihood for all our people. And we are determined to leave no one behind. I thank you for the opportunity. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Consul General. That was a great tour d'horizon of, and very inspiring one, of what is now happening in South Africa. And I'm sure that our guests today will have a lot of questions to follow up on the detail. But in the meantime, can I ask our second speaker, Mr. Yusuf Timol from Beijing, to take the floor.
Thank you, Andrew. His Excellency, Mr. Mogono, Ms. Charlton, Ms. Barnett, pleasure to be here today and participate on this distinguished panel. Ladies and gentlemen, I don't have much time, so I'm going to jump right into a presentation. And it's very difficult to try and package so much information into such a short period of time. I'm going to open up the presentation. Firstly, I'd like to just give a quick snapshot of South Africa. South Africa has a population of approximately 60 million people. We had a GDP, it posted a GDP of around about $340 billion last year. President is President Cyril Ramaphosa, and he's also the leader of the ruling party, the African National Congress. Just to give you a quick indication of the sectoral composition of the economy, our largest sectors include our finance, insurance, and real estate and business services at 19.9%. Government sector takes a very large stake at 19.4%. Our wholesale, retail, trade, catering, and accommodation, that's our tourist industry, 14.8%. And then manufacturing at 12.9%. And then we cannot discount the contribution by mining and quarrying. South Africa has been mining for over a century and has formed the backbone of our economy. In terms of our value proposition, we're the most industrialized economy on the continent. Approximately close to 40% of manufacturing on the continent takes place in South Africa. It's highly diversified. Initially, pre-1994, we were essentially highly dependent on our mining industry and have, to a large extent, diversified that quite radically. We, as you heard, are endowed with an abundance of natural resources. We have the largest known reserves of platinum, but also a prolific producer of iron ore, as well as coal, and then all the different other coal mineral commodities such as manganese, chrome, and so on. We have an extensive and modern infrastructure network, and I'll show you a little bit about that later, and a sophisticated banking sector, which is crucial for business. As you heard, our four prioritize high impact intervention areas, which is our reconstruction and development program post-COVID. We have a large emphasis on the rollout of infrastructure throughout the country. We have prioritized infrastructure because we realize it's critical to fast-tracking our economic development, and we have not been placing the necessary and due emphasis and importance on this. Rapid expansion of our energy generating capacity. At the moment, South Africa is suffering from a deficit of about 4,000 megawatts, and we are quickly filling that gap. We provided employment stimulus to create jobs and support livelihoods post-COVID. As you know, we had over 1 million jobs lost during the COVID pandemic, and a strong drive for industrial growth through our sectoral master plans. Very important for companies that have located in South Africa is that the access South Africa provides to other markets around the world. And as you can see, we have a number of agreements and preferential trade agreements that have been formed with the different regions across the world. We are a member of the WTO and very active within that multilateral organization. But some of our main agreements is the fourth one, the EFTA, SACU, a free trade agreement with Europe, our AGOA, our free trade agreement with the US, which provides a lot of access to the US market, and then also our very recent, the African Continental Free Trade Area, which became effective on the 1st of January 2021, which would aim to increase the intra-continental trade, which provides access to a market of about 1.2 billion people with a combined GDP of $2.2 trillion, with the intention of unlocking a lot of potential that is sitting on the African continent. So this is one of the main reasons why a lot of companies would relocate in South Africa and then use it as a base to export into these markets. Some of the attractive opportunities, I'll just pick out a few. Under agriculture and agro-processing, meat processing and aquaculture are two very big areas for investment, as well as the crop production for feedstock into the biofuels processing. Within the mining and minerals beneficiation area, the coal bed methane, coal to liquid, and carbon capture are very relevant in the present energy discussions. Also, the development of the titanium value chain, and then of course the PGMs beneficiation and the development of fuel cell industry. And here we're talking also the palladium, which is also used in the fuel cells for the EV vehicles. Manufacturing, our motor vehicle industry is a very, very well-known success story. 7 of the big manufacturers are located in South Africa. We produce vehicles for export and the domestic market. And the supply chain within there is very well developed, and there's a lot of government support for that. Metals fabrication, as well as pharmaceuticals at present, is 2 of the big areas which are promoted heavily. And then the clothing and textiles industry, which is also supported and is doing very well in South Africa. On advanced manufacturing, the fuel cells and energy storage are 2 prioritized areas. And then obviously medical devices at the moment, specifically around what the world has been suffering under the pandemic. On the services sector, tourism is also a very big area of promotion for the South African government because of its employment potential. And then, as you heard, also the business process outsourcing. The financial and insurance services, also a very, very opportune time to be involved in those industries. And then on infrastructure, huge amounts of investment going into energy generation and infrastructure and renewals. About 250 million renminbi, about 500 million rands is being put aside for this. Also, a new infrastructure development fund has been recently put up to be able to directly fund the fiscus over the next 10 years. Transport and logistics infrastructure, huge amounts of money being spent there. This is just to give you a snapshot of the 9 provinces of South Africa, and also give you an idea of what the strengths are. The 3 main and largest provinces is Gauteng here in the center, which is our economic hub, followed then by KwaZulu-Natal over here, which is looking specifically at logistics, tourism, and the motor vehicle industry. It's also a very, very key port province. And then Western Cape down here, which is strong in tourism, a lot of opportunities in financial and business services, and then also agriculture and agro-processing is very big there. The Department of Trade and Industry, the South African government and its agencies offer a wide range of financial support through its different financial institutions. Here we're talking about the Industrial Development Corporation, the Development Bank of South Africa, the Empowerment Fund of South Africa. These are all agencies that are there to provide the financing required, often in the form of co-partnership, co-financing, to be able to bring more investors in, provide the support, and expand the manufacturing or service base. There are several economic sectors you'll see as part of our industrial strategy that have dedicated financial incentives. As you heard, the business process outsourcing, the automotive production and development program for our automotive sector that receives the largest amount of financial support through the government. And then also, for example, the critical infrastructure program is another fund where the government would support in building the infrastructure and amenities, service amenities required for investments. A quick snapshot at some of the reasons why you should look at South Africa. It is a hot emerging market. It is the most diversified economy in Africa. We have the largest presence of multinationals on the African continent. We have about 180 of the top global Fortune 500 companies in South Africa. So that should give you an idea of the confidence that they have. It says we have a progressive constitution and an independent judiciary, which are critical in terms of protection of your rights and deeds, favorable market access to global markets, as you saw with our different trade agreements, abundant natural resources, critical for the manufacturing world, advanced financial services and banking sectors. We have the most extensive banking footprint on the African continent, as well as we are rated 19th in the world for banking by the WEF. World-class infrastructure, I'll show you some of that a little bit later. We have a young, trainable labor force, and very talented and with diversified skill sets. And in terms of quality of life, excellent. We have a very favorable cost of living, diversified culture. We are often known as the Rainbow Nation. And as you see, South Africa was also rated in the top 20 locations for best cuisine in the world, as you'll see there. This is a quick snapshot of some of our key ports. Cape Town. This one is Saldanha, which is the deep natural port for the huge amounts of iron ore exports. Durban Container Terminal, which is one of the largest container terminals in the Southern Hemisphere. And also East London, we have another one, Richards Bay Coal Terminal and Multipurpose Terminal, which is the largest commodity terminal in the Southern Hemisphere. These also serve for most of the landlocked countries within Southern Africa. We also have special economic zones where they will get specialized incentives to help attract these companies to come in to the economic zones, such as preferential tax rates, employment incentives, assistance with the building in forms of allowances, and then preferential rentals as well. We have 7 located across the country, and these are located close to the source of the areas or commodity or products and product groups that they will be promoting. We have the one-stop shop, which was recently established, and these one-stop shops are there to service investors and provide facilitation services. They provide specialty advisory to potential investors and try and eliminate all the red tape and make it as easy as possible for investors to come to South Africa and have a good experience. You will see also that it's spread across South Africa. We have a number of the one-stop shops already located in our main economically active provinces, and they will deal with everything from the clearance and registration of a business to the difficult items such as licensing and permitting and all of those, and hold the investor's hand through the process from the beginning to the end. And these are all part of the Ministry of Trade and Industry in South Africa. So you have direct access to the officials in the different ministries that you will be working in if you invest in South Africa. There we go, another slide on the roles and investments. of Investment South Africa to provide a dedicated service. So in a nutshell, our priorities is to become a supplier of industrial goods and value-added goods on the continent. Predominantly and historically, Africa has been the continent where we are exporting a lot of unprocessed, unfinished minerals and materials, and we are changing that and wanting to be a part now and more actively becoming a part of international and global supply chains. That is the main principle of our industrial policies. So we look forward to hopefully being your partner, and we are available and open for business in South Africa. Here are some resources that you can visit to get more information at sectoral level, depending on which sector you're in, and these are easily accessible via the different websites of the Ministry of Trade and Industry. Thank you very much. There are my details. You feel free to contact me if you need some more information or want to discuss any of your projects in more detail. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Yusuf. That was a true tour de force. So many takeaways, as I think they're called these days. The two that impressed me most were the diversification, how many different sectors there are, and also how big South Africa is regionally, and also your point about the commonality of legal systems, which of course is something very, very relevant to the Commonwealth. So thank you very much. And we've already got some questions coming in. So now can I ask Maxine to maybe give us a slightly different angle, a different perspective, looking at it from the senior levels of the private sector. Thank you, Maxine.
Thank you, Andrew, and thank you to the Commonwealth Chamber for the invitation, to the Honorary Consulate General Mogono, and also to Mr. Timol in Beijing. I will keep it brief today and give you an overview of Acorus and our private equity investment strategy in Africa. I'll then give you a little bit of information as to the landscape of private equity investment in Africa, particularly as to the first half of this year. We have quite a lot of data that came out quite recently. And then I think importantly, throw in a few anecdotes along the way, particularly as they pertain to South Africa, where I also happen to be from. And I don't need to cover, the importance of why South Africa is an important private equity investment destination. I think the other speakers have covered that very well. So Acorus Capital was set up by myself and the founding directors and partners just over 10 years ago now. That was at a time, certainly in Hong Kong, where if you mentioned investing in Africa, that was very much about just doing mining. The continent was not really looked at from an Asian corporate perspective, certainly, and investment perspective as a place to invest in other areas of business. And we developed Acorus to do traditional growth private equity investment, but do that in a way that leverages strategic partnerships with Asian corporates. So the idea was go through the traditional method of finding great African companies and then looking to establish partnerships for them with other Asian companies to help them boost either areas of joint venture, technology transfer, technical training, open up new markets, you name it. So, Africa, including South Africa, certainly not necessarily an easy environment to invest, but with the right selective, long-term and proactive approach, you can definitely have very strong returns in this market. We have a great team of people at Acorus. We have our base in Hong Kong. We have a partner in Beijing, and we also have an office in Johannesburg. Between us, we've done, I guess, just over $3 billion of deals in our time in Africa in about 47 different transactions. So we're not experts in every area of the continent, but we certainly feel like we've got our hands dirty enough times. I think, well, in terms of where we invest, for us, it's really the top investable 8. So certainly South Africa, and we're Sub-Saharan Africa, so not including North Africa and Egypt. But we invest in South Africa, Nigeria, Ghana, Kenya, Ethiopia. And then it's sort of a smattering of a few smaller countries that are very eligible, but maybe a bit more challenging to find larger deals in, like Botswana, Namibia, Mauritius. A couple of others could be candidates like Uganda, Mozambique, depending on the environment. I think now I'll pivot just briefly to some of the great data that was recently released by the African Venture Capital, Private Equity and Venture Capital Association for the first half of 2022. And I was actually quite surprised on these figures, considering what is broadly happening in the private equity market globally. Globally speaking, every single market, whether it was the US, Europe, other emerging markets, including Asia, saw declines in terms of the amount of private equity investment that went in the first half of 2022. Africa, on the other hand, saw an increase of $2 billion. So year on year, it went from $1.5 billion US to $3.5 billion US. And that's just the first half of the year. And that went into, I think, about 150 or so odd deals, which makes it a truly record year for the asset class, and certainly for Africa as a whole. In terms of which sectors, FinTech was the big outlier in terms of the one that attracted the most capital. But following that was ICT, industrials, energy, particularly on clean energy, and consumer discretionary. And, these have been important sectors across the continent, and they're important sectors to South Africa. But really, the amount of investment has just catapulted this year in these sectors. FinTech was up about 84%. Clean tech was up 420% year on year. And others, important ones like educational technologies, as well as health-related technologies off the back of COVID, have continued to be very popular, and I think will continue to be very popular. There is, I think, another important area in these statistics, which are that almost 50% of the investment that went into companies in Africa in the VC PE space were not operating in one country. They are pan-African companies, and certainly from the view of South Africa, there are many companies who use South Africa as a springboard in terms of as an operational base, but then they are, putting out their product, particularly in the tech sector, into other countries in Africa. And South Africa is a very good base in terms of logistics, just regular logistics like airplanes flying to get to these places. And, for example, we're invested in a company called Paycode. They're a fintech company based out of Johannesburg. They actually have all their operational staff in Johannesburg, but almost none of their operations are in South Africa in terms of their product. Their primary market is Ghana. They're in Mozambique. They're in Zambia. So, it really is quite a common, I would say nowadays, phenomenon the other reason why that's important is you do get benefits from diversifying where your income streams are coming from. And if you can, and if you are selling into other markets, you have, different types of exposures with respect to, what currency you're earning in, what might be happening in those countries from a political, economic standpoint. But that kind of makes it a bit more interesting to deal with from a risk perspective in a positive way. Besides sort of the example of Paycode, I think, some of the big deals that went through that you might have heard of include MFS Africa, Wasoko, Mkopa, Wave. These were all very large sort of Series A and B deals and attracted a lot of big name private equity companies like Sequoia, people that have, I would say, previously held back, went very big into Africa in the last half of this year. I think another really nice anecdote is that of Time Bank. Time Bank was one of the is one of the 3 digital banks that were given licenses by the South African Reserve Bank to operate. I would say now about maybe 5 years ago. So there was Time Bank, Discovery Bank, and Bank Zero. Time Bank took the approach of really targeting the lower middle income stream of the market. They have just in that very short space of 5 years, and really only, I would say, within the last 3 years, grown to have almost 6 million customers. I think they're sitting at 5.7 million customers now. But I think that's not even the interesting story. I think the interesting story is that Time Bank has now launched in the Philippines with a partnership there, and they've called themselves GoTime. And they will continue to launch in new markets where there is a very high friction access for people to get bank accounts and enjoy banking services. And I think that is a good place to end, because I think it sends a strong message about what African companies are doing. They're not just finding services and solutions that are great growth and investment stories for Africa, but actually they are taking these abroad. And certainly with respect to Asia, there is lots of opportunity for this collaboration to happen, not only in FinTech, but in other sectors. So I think I will close off my remarks there and hand over back to you, Andrew, for the Q&A.
Thank you so much, Maxine. I know everybody will have different things that they want to come back on, having listened to you. My own overwhelming impression is that you mentioned at the beginning, some of these markets are a bit difficult. For most of us here, the sort of things you've been talking about sound awesomely complex and extremely ambitious. Very, very interesting indeed how you've diversified so much. Okay, thanks again, and we will go to the Q&A. We've been having 1 or 2 comms difficulties here, as a result of which some of the people who have signed in have been sending me questions by text. I have a question here which I'll give priority. It's from Mr. Neville Schroff, who, apart from his involvement with our chamber, is also has many decades of involvement with the General Chamber here in the Africa Committee there, and has a lot of investment. So despite what you were saying, Maxine, the question is this. For some people, South Africa, in terms of safety, may still be regarded as a high-risk destination, with the exception of Cape Town. What would you advise Hong Kong business travelers, in particular, to be wary of? And how can Hong Kong, this is a broader question perhaps, not just for you, but for all the panelists, be a connect between South Africa and China and in what sectors? That's actually rather a large question, but maybe we could take the specific question first for Maxine and then throw open the bigger question to all the panelists.
Certainly. Well, I think the answer is you need to just be sensible. South Africa or anywhere in Africa, has a lot of economic disparity, but it's really not unique. I mean, if you go to Lagos, if you go to Nairobi, I mean, Addis, it's really, Accra, it's all the same. You really just need to be sensible. You need to have sensible travel arrangements. Don't sort of arrive and have yourself, milling around at the airport. Don't wear your crown jewels if you happen to have any, and make sure you pack your schedule and keep moving. And then when it's time,
right? Not
just in South Africa, pack your schedule, keep moving, take advantage of the opportunity. And then when you do have your downtime, again, go to places that are recommended, use operators. I mean, I'm not a travel agent, but there's plenty of good ones. And, I can honestly say I've never had a problem. I know people that have had problems, but, I travel across all of Africa. I never have bodyguards, armored vehicles, or anything like that. It's just me, ordinary person, and I've never had a problem. But you have to be sensible. In terms of the much bigger, broader question, how do I even go there?
Well, perhaps let me supplement, because I've had another similar question. Because in Hong Kong, we like to market ourselves. Every jurisdiction has its own marketing story, right? So we market ourselves as the super connector between Greater China and the rest of the world. This is one of the big selling points of Hong Kong. So I suppose the question is, to what extent, and I think both you and Yusuf and the Consul General all touched on this, to what extent is South Africa playing that kind of role for Africa? And what areas should Hong Kong investors be looking to when they look to South Africa in that regard? Maybe not just in South Africa itself, but beyond that.
I'll tell you how we look at it, but I'll also perhaps explain how others might look at it. So, I mean, we look at it from a perspective of first and foremost, what the business is doing. How are they earning their income? Is it recurring income? Are there elements of the business that may have the ability to hard currency adjust? So there are many industries across Africa, for example, the telecom sector, certain parts of FinTech, certain parts of logistics, certainly certain areas of mining, or any kind of soft or hard commodities. There are dollar or hard currency adjustments that can be made. So that kind of, we look around having some protection with respect to currency. Secondly is scalability. Now, that really depends. We tend to focus at the moment a lot on FinTech and ICT and logistics. So scalability means different things in those sectors. But I guess the main lesson, with Africa, as any African can tell you, is time is your worst enemy. And it may be your best friend. Things just take a lot longer. And so your time horizon that you may have for something in China or something in Hong Kong, you really need to relax and go for the longer haul in the African context. It doesn't mean you won't get there, but you just have to be more patient. Thirdly, and importantly, you can't go in as a passive investor. Perhaps in Hong Kong, you can invest in a China growth fund or something like this, and your money will go up and it's fine and you don't really have to be involved. But the best investments in Africa are actually those where you can add value through some mechanism. So in our case, we do that through these strategic corporate partnerships. And that's regional. It has, of course, been a lot to do with Hong Kong corporates and Chinese corporates, but can also be Southeast Asian. It really just depends on who we happen to find and who might be suitable. In terms of others, other investors, from the corporate perspective, of course, those companies are looking for businesses that they understand. If you have a deal in cable manufacturing in Ghana, and you bring it to a cable manufacturer in China, and probably the top 3 cable manufacturing companies in the world are in China, that's a company that they will really understand. They understand what they're doing. They can evaluate their operations. So the perceived risk in terms of that deal is very manageable for them. And so I think that's very key is, of course, there are risks when you look at them very broadly and generally and macroeconomically, but risks are perceived risks. It matters how you can manage them. And so if you understand a sector or you understand an industry or you have connections or whatever the case may be, then those risks become mitigated as you go along.
That's very fair.
That's pretty much it.
I'd like to ask the Consul General's view as well, not just on the general role of South Africa in terms of investing from here, but one of the sectors that's been touched on, but not in detail, is the tourism sector. So a kind of double-barrel question, how do you see South Africa's role as a super connector from Asia into Africa generally, and also post-COVID, as we hope we emerge into a more normal world again, how do you see opportunities for Hong Kong individuals as tourists or businesses as tourism investors to go into the South African tourist market?
Thanks for the question. And in terms of South Africa being a super connector, just like Hong Kong, we are certainly well placed geographically, and we have ports and infrastructure which support the trade within South Africa. So that's one of the advantages, like of rather being a super connector to Africa. In terms of where tourism is concerned, it's quite interesting that, like of late, the airports company, I think it says like our airports, there's been about 66% of levels of increase of tourism in South Africa since after post-pandemic. So I think there's a very positive sign that we're doing quite fairly well in terms of attracting tourism in South Africa. Obviously, most people know within all the our provinces, we got so much to offer in terms of where tourism is concerned.
Well, I'd certainly second that from limited personal experience. Yusuf, turning to you, you're sitting up in Beijing, interesting days there recently. We don't talk politics on this show, as it were, but there's no doubt about it that worldwide, locally, wherever we're talking about, from Hong Kong to South Africa, wherever, geopolitical tensions have definitely influenced the way people perceive business investment opportunities. So how have these tensions and developments affected people's perceptions of investing into South Africa? And these are not just sort of general feelings, it's a sort of question of US dollar appreciation, interest rate increases, and so on.
This is, this kind of discussion and these points have sort of become recently centered to our diplomacy debate recently. And I want to cite specifically the recent Taiwan matter. South Africa on a number of different platforms were tasked to take a more defined position from the position which it was posturing at. But South Africa recognizes in this particular case, the one China policy and has supported it and will continue to support it as such. Having said this, these geopolitical tensions do have implications way beyond regional borders. I mean, with this comes both gains and losses. And these will vary from one country to the next. Now, in South Africa, I mean, we've gained, for example, with a very high demand for fossil fuels in Europe of recent. I mean, coal is currently trading, South African coal is currently trading at $305 per metric ton compared to $120 about 18 months ago, to give you an example. But we're also experiencing losses on the other hand, where our inflation is now sitting at, in August, it was sitting at about 7.9%, which is beyond the 3.6 target range that the South African Reserve Bank always aims to keep the inflation within. So has it affected business and investment? I would say that it has, but it's different compared to other countries. I mean, each having their own set of variables and where they find themselves in their different evolutionary cycle and what they have to offer in terms of the resources that they reside with. But South Africa hasn't been a target, and it remains firm in its position of taking an independent but firm stance on geopolitical tensions. I mean, as I mentioned earlier, as an example, we have about 180 Fortune Global 500 companies operating in South Africa, and we have about 180 medium and large size Chinese private and SOCs in South Africa, all conducting business. As you heard earlier on, South Africa is often described as the gateway into Africa, where companies will set up their regional head offices in South Africa, and then from there implement their strategic strategies for whichever region it may be in South Africa, because of all the different positives that it has to offer. So even though we have all these geopolitical tensions, I think South Africa still remains a destination of choice to many big companies, and to a large extent, we are not influenced by these tensions to a degree. And if you look at the multilateral organizations, South Africa plays a prominent role, and we served on the Security Council. We have a loud voice in the WTO, and we have a strong contingent in Geneva, pushing our agenda. So from that perspective, I think South Africa is to a little degree, we are not that affected as some other countries and regions of the world.
Thank you very much, Yusuf. Time is pressing a little. Before we get to a concluding question or two, can I ask our distinguished chairman, Julia, who not only is the chairman of the Commonwealth Chamber, but wears a number of very distinguished corporate hats, both in Hong Kong and elsewhere, if she would like to put any questions to this distinguished panel.
Sure. So I'm very interested in thinking about the fundraising opportunities in Hong Kong, for example, on the Hong Kong Stock Exchange for South African mineral companies, and potentially the sort of FinTech companies, which we've been hearing about as well. And I just wondered if any of you had any thoughts on how that sort of angle of how Hong Kong could support South Africa could be enhanced, perhaps, and pursued more.
Who would like to go first?
If I may,
yes.
Andrew?
Of course.
If in South Africa, we have about 16 Chinese companies that are either in independent or joint ventures in the South African minerals industry. So to give you an example, at the moment, the largest PGM development project is in, I think it's in Limpopo. It is Ivanhoe project. They also have interests, nickel and copper in Congo, but this is a $10 billion project for the development, and Chinese CITIC Group is the majority, one of the majority shareholders there with 27%. They made 2 acquisitions of equity, and that gives you an idea of the confidence that they have in the South African minerals industry. A lot of these companies do raise and operate their capital from Hong Kong, from what I understand. They have their subsidiary in Hong Kong, and much of that is channeled through there. Right now, a lot of the mineral assets and assets, especially in the tourism industry, you mentioned also FinTech. A lot of these are assets in South Africa with the current interest rate and the currency devalued are coming at a huge discount. So, you know, you even see, I mean, the bond rates in South Africa at the moment are all attractive, even though, you know, for the common South African on the street, unfortunately, with the high interest rates and the currency devaluation, they are paying a little bit more for products. But for the investor, there are a lot of assets at the moment in South Africa that require capitalization after suffering during the pandemic period that are very attractive to investors.
I think I was more focusing on whether Hong Kong could help with fundraising, and not only for Chinese invested companies, but also for other South African-based companies, perhaps. And I do think Hong Kong is a platform, and I know that South Africa has such a good legal system and is fully signed up to IOSCO. It's a very internationally recognized mineral jurisdiction. So I do think that's an area where fundraising and public markets in Hong Kong, possibly when the markets have improved a bit from current levels in Hong Kong, would be something which may be of interest.
Consul General, what do you think? I mean, that's of great interest to us here. I think that's, maybe we should have another webinar focusing more on the capital opportunities, because this whole business of the free flow of capital is, I don't want to say under challenge, but there's a lot of issues all around the world, and they affect us here too. But there are still things that we can hope to contribute. I mean, I think Julia's question is extremely pertinent. Maybe we should try and arrange a separate discussion, because we are running out of time, unfortunately. I'd like to sort of wrap things up with a final question that's come in. Let's say you know, you've all had some very, very interesting personal career experiences, to put it mildly. So I'm looking at Maxine, for example, and all the things that you've done about female empowerment of business communities in Africa, which sounds quite challenging by its own. I'm looking at Consul General and his you know, his leadership of a traditional community, which is sort of like a career on itself. And then Yusuf with his extremely colourful international experience of selling South Africa from places as different as London and Tehran. So if you either look back or look ahead, if you have to wrap this up now and just give you 2 minutes each to say, what are the things that you're looking forward to based on your past experiences, which you'd hope to be able to tell us if you came back to do this seminar again in two years' time? Maybe we can start with let's start with Maxine. I'm going to give the
Sure.
I'll let the CG have the last word, of course.
Well, I think Yusuf made a very poignant comment in that in a highly polarized world at the moment, Africa actually, of which South Africa is a major part, is a relatively neutral territory. So if you're going to be putting your capital to work, I actually think that figures that we've seen, like the ones out of the Private Equity and Venture Capital Association published for the half year 2022, that this could continue. I'm not suggesting that overall globally there are not headwinds, and macroeconomically speaking, there aren't headwinds. That this is going to be a challenging macroeconomic environment, but that doesn't mean investment stops. So I think in that respect, Africa could continue to be a positive focus for investors. It certainly hasn't changed anything to do with our, commitment or investment strategy. So, yeah, we look forward to doing more of the same.
But we need patience and persistence, according to what you said earlier. Good. Yusuf, what would be your little 2-minute, 1 or 2 minute takeaway?
I think, Andrew, the biggest thing for me that I've noticed is, South Africa always goes to the traditional markets to go and look for that finance, that funding, that project support. I mean, we just have to look at some of our major banks in South Africa. I'm talking about our commercial banks. I mean, if you look at Standard Bank, for example, which is the largest commercial bank, but also I think they're the second largest investment operation in South Africa. I mean, they got a huge contingent of about 300 people sitting in London, Rand Merchant Bank, Investec, which is now called 91, and they're going to the traditional markets. So, I mean, if we could see something in the next few years where project owners would start coming to look to raise capital in a major international finance center like yourselves in Hong Kong, that would be a major achievement, and I think a step in the right direction.
Thank you, Yusuf. And finally, Consul General, what would be your final words of wisdom?
Well, thank you, Andrew. Actually, I'd love to see more Asian market, more especially Hong Kong investors investing more in Africa, because to be honest, I see less of them comparing to mainland China. So in that, like, if we could possibly link the JSE and the Hong Kong Stock Exchange, possibly we could see a positive what do you call changes in terms of where the markets are concerned. But I'd love to see that. Thank you.
Thank you so much, CG. Well, Consul General and distinguished guests, in the interest of time, I really must at last bring this webinar to its conclusion. For those in the audience whose questions haven't been answered, please do write to us. We'll forward your views and queries to our speakers happily. I'd like to repeat my thanks to all the speakers for being patient and thorough in replying to questions, and indeed for their help in putting together the logistics for this event today. I'm sure we're all convinced that the investment and financial opportunities in South Africa for Hong Kong corporates and beyond are only just beginning to come into picture. I'd like to thank all our members and guests for signing up. Please do keep an eye on our website for future events from the Commonwealth Chamber of Commerce. And also, please do let us know if you have other suitable topics, whether they're sectoral related or whether they're country related, that you think we should address. And with those words, may I now belatedly hand the virtual floor back to our chairman, Julia Charlton, for her concluding remarks.
Thanks, Andrew. Well, very briefly, I'd really like to thank our fantastic panelists for providing such exciting and insightful understandings of the economic and financial landscape of South Africa. Clearly, the regional sectoral strengths are particularly important. And I think as an audience, we've got a clear picture of the landscape of the ongoing and planned investment and business opportunities. So thank you all very much. I'm terribly excited if we can talk more about fundraising for South African companies. That may be a sort of education process for the Hong Kong market as well. But as His Excellency, the Consul General, mentioned, dialogue between the Johannesburg Exchange and the Hong Kong Exchange certainly is something which would be wonderful to facilitate. So thank you so much, each of you. We look forward to seeing you again soon. Thank you all very much for joining. Goodbye.